One thing that's confusing, or that can easily be confused in Tsong-kha-pa's text, is that he gives two usages of existing conventionally, existing ultimately, and then he gives an exceptional usage. Well, he actually gives, for each, he actually gives four meanings of existing conventionally. And that's the key to cracking what he's up to. Then, for today, you're reading the chapter number 8. Let's just briefly look at that in the synopsis. Number 1. This is Maitreya speaking in the Ornament for the Great Vehicle Sutras, theg, Sūtrālaṃkāra. That phenomena are natureless, so Maitreya says, Buddha taught in the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras and so forth that phenomena are natureless. What was he considering? How could all phenomena be natureless? You know, the Prasangikas say, well, what it means that no phenomenon at all inherently exist. But for the, at least the way Tsong-kha-pa views Chittamatra, that would be as good as saying no phenomenon exists. And if you say no phenomenon has any nature, that would seem to be highly negative, would it not? And so he makes what you could almost say are cute or aesthetically, I don't know if it's aesthetically delightful at first. I found it aesthetically delightful yesterday, finally. And what I had to do, you know, because you say, oh, come on, this couldn't have been what Buddha had in mind when he made such a blanket statement. Look, it says, compounded phenomena 3 times are natureless in the sense that a future compounded phenomenon is not produced through its own power. So if you said all impermanent things are natureless, would they have to be natureless in the same way? The future ones are not produced through their own power. They rely on causes and conditions. Past ones are not produced again as themselves, right? Something doesn't duplicate itself. And present ones don't abide for a second moment. In that sense, all phenomena are natureless. The future lacks the nature of being produced through its own power, future ones. Past ones lack the nature of being produced again as themselves, not as a later continuum, but as themselves. You know, we often feel, I'm here again, right? Which is enough. But of course, if you felt, who's here? You know, which happens in certain states, that would not be what is being sought. So you see, your thrust, you know, it can appear that your only choice is nihilism or reification. Better than nihilism is reification if you can't find the middle. Well, finding the middle is extremely difficult. So even on something like a past compounded phenomenon is not produced again as itself, one could feel that, gee, that I couldn't posit karma then, because I wouldn't be existing at the time of the effect. Follow? And you could lose ethical background, ethical stance from that point of view. So you might need to be told that there is a permanent self that goes from lifetime to lifetime and reaps the effects of the karmas. we might have to have that reinforced. And then there's a set of Tsong-kha-pa, 4. So we have 3 and 4 is 4, 7, 8. They do it in different ways. You say gong shi. Didn't we talk about that? Gong shi gurva ngona je sum. If you're going to show that something requires interpretation, there are 3 factors. You have to show the basis in Buddhist thought. Now, of course, some people say, well, the Buddha doesn't have any basis in her thought because they just speak spontaneously and, say something like, and everybody hears it according to their own needs. So how can you say that a Buddha has something in mind when saying such and such? Well, it's describing the situation, the context in which the trainee hears it in this different way, okay? And also another way of saying it is, as I was asking the Dalai Lama this question when we were, I think it was, anyway, going from Edinburgh to some other place in Scotland, about 2 hours that went like that. And we were talking about this tongue topic. And he said, this is a description from the point of view of sentient beings. That Buddha would have something in mind and yet say something else in words. So that's number 1. Purpose. Gongshi is the basis in Buddha's thought. Most people translate this as the intention. However, Gerba, I say, is the intention. Nurla Nurje. Nurje means something that harms, refutes the, actually it's the literal teaching. The Nur means explicit, but there's a lot of hedging on that. In the first wheel, it's both the explicit and the literal. So, what could harm? It's lung and rikpa, lung tan rikpa. Lung means scripture, and sutras and commentaries, and treatises. Rikpa is reasoning. So if there's reasoning to oppose what Buddha said, then what Buddha said, if there's valid reasoning, then what Buddha said must be considered to require interpretation. So, but since Buddhas can't be saying things just insensibly, there has to be some truth that they are coming from, and there has to be a purpose in, like saying all phenomena are natureless. Now we can posit what's in Buddha's thought, and that's just what Maitreya is doing here, okay? When Buddha says that all phenomena are natureless. That's what can be posited. Then what is the purpose of saying all phenomena are natureless? This really gets difficult because they'll be like, what is the purpose of the literal reading of the middle wheel? Literal reading. We said that the smart ones put together the gongshi, right? Smart people, smart Chitamatrans, right? Smart samsamba, put it together, and put together that all these 5 things are what Buddha's getting at. So what's the purpose of wording it in this weird way, is sort of general blanket negation with respect to all phenomena? Well, you know, like you say, well, it's spoken that way to prasangikas. Because they can, and the only good reason that anyone's been able to come up with, and then what's the reason, is that they can only posit karma within an absence of inherent existence. That is really elegant. And it, you know, it brings a smile to your face. No matter how stretched it is, you see, it fits in the system. That's one of those elegant moments. What is the purpose of Buddha's saying in the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, literally, that all phenomena are natureless? It is for the sake of prasangikas, because prasangikas are people who can posit cause and effect only when there's no inherent existence. You see, the Chitamatrans are not saying that the prasangikas hold that cause and effect karma don't exist. They say that by holding that these don't inherently exist, it amounts to saying they don't exist, but they don't even know the import of it. But these are people who, wrong as they are, have to have the inherent existence of phenomena denied for them to posit cause and effect. It's a very, very cute out. Very, the aesthetic delight, you know, because he is strong, despite the fact that you know that they're stretching the system to the limits and going beyond. Especially because the Sutra Unraveling the Thought says that there are those who are interested in my doctrine, have faith in my doctrine, so forth, but due to blah, 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 misunderstand it as meaning. They're talking about the Madhyama. Buddha himself is talking about the Madhyamakas, according to the mind-only people. And they fall to an extreme of nihilism. They've ruined not only themselves, but ruin others. Now, what's that? What is this ruinousness? You know, if they're positing cause and effect, you would think they're really not ruining themselves or ruining others. Do you see? Ruin only if you... Why is it not ruinous? Because you're still positing cause and effect and practicing. You're not taking it as an extremist. Tsong-kha-pa's claim, or Gelugpa claims, is that they're not taking it as extremist, meaning not existent at all. But now if you look around Mahāyāna Buddhism in the world, you see that people are saying, oh, well, karma really doesn't exist, you know, and quite often, you know, the doctrine is so undercut. I'm not saying everywhere, by any means, but you hear this. There are these misunderstandings, but they aren't Madhyamakas. But this sort of, so Tsong-kha-pa fought against this kind of doctrine in Tibet. A lot. They weren't giving enough status to cause and effect, karma, and so forth, practice of the path. They say, oh, these are things that just you temporarily have to assume exist because you haven't understood the truth.
So how does mind only say that Madhyamaka still ruins things? How, you know, you go to hell.
That's the question.
There's no answer.
That's the inelegant part of it. You know, ruin themselves is the hard part of ruining self and others. because you mention this to somebody else, and they figure, oh, well, cause and effect don't exist, karma doesn't exist. But once you're positing that it is for these so-called madhyamikas, right? No, not so-called. No, yeah, so-called. That this is taught because they can only posit cause and effect within the context of an absence of inherent existence, then how do those people get ruined? Well, okay, I'll say something. When you're debating, you've got to give an answer no matter what. I say that it prevents them from knowing the three natures and the three non-natures. Good answer. Elegant. Aesthetically pleasing. So you miss out on the correct view. You can't even get out of cyclic existence because you're viewing other powered natures as not established by way of their own character, certainly.
But
But
they don't say Satranikas go to hell because of
right.
they're
Don't they say it's worse to
Yeah.
fall to an extreme of nihilism than to permanence?
But
And they would say that Satranikas are
But you see, if these people are positing cause and effect of karma, is that an extreme of nihilism? You see, usually when you fall to one extreme, you fall to the other, because you're not delineating the middle. So anyway, it goes on like this. And actually, the way I read it this morning, was it, or last night, that instead of thinking of it as Buddha's thought behind his teaching these things in the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra, I looked down at all of these as basic positions of Buddhism. You know, future compounded phenomena is not produced through, it's a great exposition. If you want to take a list of assumptions that we mostly ordinarily have, that are wrong from a Buddhist perspective, then this list that goes on for these 5 and then the next 8 tells you a lot. And if you word them in their positive versions, some can easily be turned around to that. So, in the previous 2 chapters on Asanga's grounds of bodhisattvas and his compendium of ascertainments, Tsong-kha-pa was showing how the proponents of mind only debate with the madhyamikas, right? He was establishing that they do debate. And that leads to his dealing with the fact that in some circumstances, proponents of mind only propound that all phenomena conventionally exist, or all other powered natures conventionally exist. Do you follow? And that sounds just like the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. And so how could it be that they hold that other powered natures are established by way of their own character, and in other places hold that other powered natures conventionally exist? It's by seeing that they themselves assign different meanings to the term conventionally exist. Okay? So you see just to repeat, in 6 and 7, he's establishing that the proponents of mind only do not take these statements in the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras literally. They're opposed to it, and they're opposed to madhyamikas who do take them literally. Then, as sort of a counter, it has to be explained how, on some occasions, proponents of mind only say that all phenomena conventionally exist. And you have to find them, what do you say? You have to see that they couldn't possibly mean what the Madhyamakas are saying, because they're arguing with them and saying that you have to posit Buddhist thought. You have to think of the three natures and the three non-natures, okay? So then, and then in chapter 8, what Tsong-kha-pa is doing is giving the basis in Buddhist thought, you see, not just the three natures and three non-natures come into this. So you can see his mode of procedure. 2 chapters to show that they are in disagreement with the literal reading of Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, to show how they do use the same statements as the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, but those statements mean something different. Another way of saying it is, mind-only proponents of mind-only, do not take the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras literally and blame the Madhyamakas for doing so. So you see, he had to have that background. And then 1 chapter indicates the gongshi, what Buddha was thinking of, what Buddha had in this case, it's his, in the back of his mind, so to speak, you see. We say in the back, what did you have in the back of your mind when you made that statement? And in 5, he's telling you how important the Sutra Unraveling the Thought is. He's tying mind only down to the Sutra Unraveling the Thought. Now, that's a big move. What about the Tathagata Sutras, or even this one that's quoted in the Lankavatara Sutra as saying that there's a manifest Buddha, fully developed Buddha, within the mental continuums of all beings. But the Lankavatara Sutra itself, the Lankavatara Sutra is important to mind only also, is also important to mind only. It says that that kind of Tathagata teaching is not to be taken literally. It itself says that. So you get the Sutra Unraveling the Thought, you've got the Lankavatara Sutra, but really, you'd have to do a reading of a Sangha, Vasubandhu, and so forth, see what their sources were, and see if it's really justified to tie the system down to Sutra Unraveling the Thought. One purpose in doing that is to show that, unlike the Jonangas, that Yondrup is a mere megha. The thoroughly established nature is a non-affirming negative. It's not some sort of positive phenomenon or an affirming negative. It's just an absence. So there's apophatic and cataphatic. Which is which?
Apophatic is negative.
And Rob Gemello in Arizona,
right,
came up with this description of Buddhist teachings in 2 categories, or 2 important categories of Buddhist teaching. One is very negative, and the other is positive. And some people weren't satisfied with the negative and went on to present, even in Gelugpa, the fundamental mind of clear light, the, Mahamudra, the mind Vajra in Nyingma, Semgye. So you get this tension, even within systems, of negatives and positives.
So the Jonangas would be cataphatic?
Yes. There's an apophatic taste to it, but when it comes down to the ultimate itself, it's cataphatic. These categories have just about run their course in the academy, but you'll see it in what are still contemporary writings. I don't think you'd see it in things being produced in the last couple of years. And Gemello himself has sort of laughed at the fact that this division has meant so much to others. Meaning, let's quit talking about that and get on. But it does say a lot. Okay, now, in number 9, am I right? Which you're yet to read. There, I'm putting it together. There's a discussion of what the middle is, just what the middle is, with a very interesting delineation of the first 2 stanzas of the first chapter of Maitreya's Uta Namje, differentiation of the middle, U, actually, in the extremes, ta, utan, ta, number, jeba, differentiating the middle and the extremes. So, in chapter 10, which is, you see, in 5, Tsong-kha-pa shows the importance of sutra unraveling of thought. At the beginning of 6, he identifies the 2 extremes. And then over 6, 7, 8, and 9, he's mainly concerned with refuting the extreme of deprecation, although many other topics come up in the meantime. You know, the argument with the Madhyamakas is about the extreme of deprecation. The positing of the middle is not that, but he's positing the middle. Let's see. Actually, I'd like to say that 6 and 7 are treating the extreme of deprecation. 8 is presenting the Gongshi, the basis in Buddhist thought. 9 is, it's the middle, and it's also, when it gets into Dharmakirti, Gongshi again. 9 is a grab bag, because it's doing Maitreya's Utanamje, and then ancillarily doing a few other scholars. And he just says, well, I've spoken already about Vasubandhu and Stiramati, which is true. And, you know, it's going along the way. And now with respect to Dignaga and Dharmakirti, and he gives, I think, 1 sentence to Dignaga. And then with Dharmakirti, he cites 4 stanzas, positing the meaning behind Buddhist thought again. Then in 10, he gets to the extreme of superimposition. And I wanted to just start this on page 96. Sangha uses a threefold reasoning, which also in his summary of the Great Vehicle, and similar threefold reasonings are in the Grounds of Bodhisattva and the Compendium of Ascertainments. The stanzas are quite cryptic, because awareness does not exist prior to name, because many, and because not restricted. There are contradictions of its essence, many entities, and mixture of entities. Therefore, it is proof. So, with commentary, one can understand the stanza. There are the contradictions. So there are 3 contradictions, right? That are listed below. That if a bulbous, blade-based thing able to hold fluid, for instance, were established through the force of its own mode of subsistence as the referent of the verbal convention pot, then the imputational nature would exist in the essence of that bulbous thing. The imputational nature, so that means right? Because an awareness of the name of an object would have to exist prior to learning its name. So when it says, because awareness does not exist prior to name, that means an awareness of the name of an object does not exist prior to learning the name of an object, then I'm not pretending that this is obvious, but I mean, you can see there's some stimulation coming out, stimulation of thought. If things are so ready for names, then shouldn't we know the names without learning them? One object that has many names would have to be many entities, because many names are used for many objects, for one object. That's true. This
I've never understood.
Well, I'm called Jeffrey, I'm called Hopkins, I'm even called Paul. You know, people call on the phone and say, could I please speak with Paul? And I know immediately they're selling me something.
What is it that would make it necessary for those many names to refer to many objects?
If the suitability of being named as Paul and Jeffrey and Hopkins subsisted in the very nature of the object, then the objects would have to be three. They'd have to have a threefold nature. So there'd be three objects. And I sort of, you know, Paul is, you know, I don't identify with that at all. You know, it's just a bare thing where I try to remember that if the name Paul's called out, it might be me, but I usually can't remember that. And
So it is something different.
well, it's, I mean, that's how I look at it.
Right.
Failed to be able to do that. And then Hopkins, I'm still uncomfortable with, probably because I've never had children, and I just don't function in, you know, Hopkins is still my father or somebody. I've got three older brothers, they can be Hopkins. Whereas many people, I understand that many people, when they think Hopkins, think of me. It's all right. It's all right, you can do that. Now, what about roles? Doctor, friend, carpenter. Now, it's not saying that we necessarily go as far as I have in making these separate, but they're saying if you follow out the implications of the suitability of having this name and this title and that title, then there would have to be several of each of us. Jung said that people have to realize that they are playing roles. You shouldn't think professor, because you're not going to, you know, that's not in your being. When you follow that out enough, then there's nothing that is, right? Like Jeffrey or whatever, it's all designated. Then the entities of many objects that have the same name would be mixed. Now we have problems with this, right? We've talked about it. Somebody who's called Mary, and then you meet another Mary. Richard Davis, who's coming. I know another Richard Davis. And so it's been very complicated for me to clear my mind of the other Richard Davis and look at this guy, right? And if you knew some person you particularly disliked, in your childhood with a certain name, right? You sort of have to, work on that. It's really odd. So, we're getting toward the end of the semester, and the reasonings, I think, are very important. But I think we do have to go back and ease into, do chapter 9. For next time, read pages, 96 on the reasonings, 96 through, well, I guess 99. And then, in Reflections on Reality, we need to spend time on these, and see how much we can do. It's 402 to 427. And what this is, it's quotes from Jayanesheva and so forth, and other writers. So you can get a run on the whole chapter, which gives a number of different reasonings. And let's talk about them in detail.